my favorite part is being able to come up close to the animals that you can't always do that in the wild. So.
I like to see the gorillas.
Panda bears.
I am a fan of tigers.
I like more like like the pavilions where you see the smaller animals.
Zoos had existed in various forms for many thousands of years. It was noble people or royalty that kept animals as sort of a show of power. The menagerie-style zoo where you have one of this and one of that and one of another creature that members of the public can go to really originated in the 18th century. Going back to the 1960s, 50s, and periods of time before that, you could just send out contractors, or even your own expeditions if you're a zoo that can afford it, to go to Latin America or Asia or Africa and collect up animals and bring them back for your zoo. When you look at a facility like there was at the Toronto Zoo for the elephants, that was very small, less than an acre, where the animals were experiencing health problems and psychological problems. Aringa and Toka came from the wild. We understand that they were part of a culling operation in South Africa, where whole families and groups of elephants were killed, that the young calves were kept alive and sold off to zoos, and that they were two of those animals. So they would suffer the trauma of having their whole family killed and then be, corralled and then later on created and sent across the ocean to the Toronto Zoo. ZooCheck is an animal advocacy organization that engages in a broad range of activities aimed at the protection primarily of wildlife, removing animals from not so great circumstances and relocating them to better lives elsewhere. We're standing here in front of the Sumatran tiger exhibit. The animal's engaged in pacing behavior and has paced a path actually in the ice. They'll engage in it for reasons like boredom or frustration. You don't see these behaviors in animals in the wild, basically a product of captivity. Most of the polar bear exhibits in zoos are very, very small. Polar bears are the widest ranging terrestrial animal on Earth and should have much, much more expansive natural environments. And no matter how many toys you give them, it's just very difficult to keep them occupied, especially if they're wide-ranging animals. They have this mural on the back that pictures the African savanna. That's something that you see in zoos all over the world, and to make things look little bit better than they are. But what's really interesting that a lot of visitors don't notice here is that you see there's vegetation. So it looks sort of natural in the exhibit, but it's actually vegetation that's there for cosmetic purposes only. If you look at these little they look like bushes along here and along there. They're electrified wires. So the gorillas, they will not go beyond that. They can't access that vegetation, even though in the wild they would want to. They would want to manipulate and eat that vegetation if it's edible. I think people have to apply the process of critical thinking. I think a lot of people go to the zoo and a lot of them say, well, this doesn't look so good, or maybe this is too small, or maybe this could be better. But then they sort of, put that in the back of their mind and they make an assumption that the zoo knows what they're doing.
Some of the animals, I feel maybe don't need to be here. They're out of their elements.
Some of the enclosures
I feel like needs some work.
The crocodile's like 10 feet, and then you give it like 15 like by 15 space. It's like not even that much space for it to roam.
Sometimes I feel sorry for the animals that they aren't in their natural habitat.
I mean, it's good they got rid of the elephants.
So they decided, primarily on cost reasons, that the elephants had to go. And then the debate became, where do they go? They wanted the elephants to go to another zoo. They fought tooth and nail to try to make sure that that sanctuary never became a reality. But in the end, it was a very, very contentious political campaign. It took 3 years, but we won. We sent them down to Paws Sanctuary. The 3 of them were very weak when they arrived because they had been standing around in the Toronto Zoo for their entire lives. One of them, Aringa, was one of the sicklier elephants. She had a lot of problems, and in fact the zoo had said she hadn't even laid down for many years at the zoo because of her ailments. After quite a number of months at the Paws Sanctuary, she was able to run up to the highest parts of the hills, and she was, wading in water and pulling down trees and doing all kinds of other things. Their space that they inhabit is hundreds and hundreds of times bigger than they had at the Toronto Zoo. They have year-round pasture, they have trees to pull down. All of these opportunities to do what they're doing now would never have materialized if they had gone to another zoo. When I started doing this work 30 some odd years ago, I actually was a big zoo supporter. But as I learned more about zoos, as I immersed myself in the whole industry and learned more and more about it, I came to realize it's not a good thing. No demonstrable conservation purpose. They're not rehabilitating animals. They're not providing funding for field conservation. They really have nothing going for them except perhaps their entertainment value on a local basis. We can go anywhere and find amazing nature. We have to realize that we don't need it in a box down at the zoo. What we need to do is change the way we think and recognize that it's everywhere, respect the fact that it's everywhere, and try to make sure it stays everywhere.